find a way. I spent 5 years in Japan, a year in Siberia, a year in Canada, all that time in tiny spaces with no gardens. So yeah, this is my experiment on indoor composting. So I like to start with why bother with such tiny scale? Because a lot of the funding applications I get rejected from are because I'm not working at scale. And I think if we look at the number of apartment dwellers in New Zealand and the growing number of apartment dwellers, that's where the scale is. It's the number of people that have limited space. Modern townhouses, the gardens are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. But if we don't find a way to let those people do some composting, we're going to miss out on a huge demographic. There's a lot of homes with contaminated soil, like entire cities and parts of Europe. And I think even I've got an engineering friend in Melbourne who's like, you wouldn't want to plant food in the soil in most of Melbourne City. And then finally, my favorite reason is a better way to make use of food scrap buckets. So here in Auckland, we've got thousands and thousands of these ugly green buckets that I think we could either beautify with indoor plants with composting happening in the bottom, or set up some kind of creative exchange with the urban farms and composting hubs to get the food scraps turned into soil to grow food rather than put on trucks and heading down to Reparoa to feed the anaerobic digester. So some of the products I've got in these photos, I'll talk about in a future slide, but this one is probably my favorite, with a house plant inside a bigger pot. The bigger pot has composting happening in the bottom where the food scraps are mixed with soil, and it's all maturing in the base very quietly, very gently. The pacha pot here, I use these to each level has individual event waste composting happening, and I can open the lid and poke around and wait till they're ready. The raised bed down here, this is the sub pod in-ground worm farm. Yeah, so the inspiration for this, I was doing the Huapara Kore verification for 3 years, and one of the big questions in that study is how do you elevate the mana of Hine Ahuone, the deity of the soil? And I really took that to heart and was like, I already treat her so well. How can I treat her any better? And so there was a sense of can we bring the soil inside and participate actively in this indoor composting process? I've done nature communication studies with Saskia von Diest of Ecofluency, and her direct message on one of my coaching sessions was to help translate the messages I'm getting from the landscapes I work with and help my colleagues and my clients understand what the earth is asking of us. I had a visit from Ponamu Skelton as part of my Huapara Kore studies, and I kind of said to her, this is what I'm doing, and this is how I'm working with Hina Huone, and I feel it's mana enhancing. Are you okay with the way I'm working? And she was so excited that I just thought, okay, I've got the green light there. And then Rebecca Swan's work with the soil food web and the microscopy. I mean, we can see how much life there is in the compost, that it backs up my belief from a biodynamic perspective that the soil has intelligence, consciousness, sensitivity, and we're starting to measure the activity. So yeah, it feels like those microbes are wanting to be more kind of closer to our daily lives, not tucked away in a corner somewhere. I've got a colleague who's employed at Auckland Council who refuses to use her food scrap bucket. She says they stink. She found maggots. It was like, no more. We're just not doing it. So I think that there's that responsibility to find a way of offering that kind of homeowner a solution. And then my favorite inspiration is my little granddaughter Hazel, who's 3 years old. Her mother does not compost, and when I go visit, I need to set something up that doesn't look like composting. So this is sort of ideas that have been percolating around. So to compost inside, we're separated from the soil, separated from the ground. So looking at other in-vessel composting systems, Hungry Bin Worm Farm, I'm sure we all are familiar with. Aerobin, top right, is a product. This is a global brand. It's separated from the soil. There's a little hose out the back that catches the leachate. Then the Pachamama, the clay pot system from Victoria. And then finally the compost tumbler. So these are all good, but you wouldn't bring them inside, really. I mean, I bring the Pacha pots inside, but they're a little bit large for a tiny dwelling. So here are the 4 methods that I found work really quite well. So the first one is trench composting in a container, and you can do this with the food scrap bucket. Start with soil in the bottom, put food scraps over, more soil, food scraps, more soil. And the only thing to be mindful of with this is that if the food scraps have a lot of moisture, then the bottom layer has to be sort of spongy logs and twigs that will hold that moisture. Then indoor worm farming, which is like a worm farm in a plastic container. I often have them under the sink. Again, sort of high maintenance. I think it's less effective, but perhaps a useful tool for apartment dwellers to see that decomposition process up close, to have their own pet worms, and to see that food scraps don't have to smell as they turn to soil. Over on the right-hand side are my sort of preferred methods, that trench composting disguised by a houseplant. So this kind of fun camouflage, I reckon there could be a way of creating a product that is sold in garden centres, where people don't have to kind of find the 2 pots that fit together, but you actually get a double pot system from the outset. So maybe that's feedback at the end of this if you have an idea for that. I got rejected for the community wastewise funding with this concept. So doing it all on my own. Next up is the indoor in-ground worm farm. So I feel like this system's better for the worms. And so I use a plastic container, put holes around the sides and the bottom. The worms get their food scraps inside the bucket, so it's rodent proof. And then the worm wee trickles out the bottom into the soil, feeding the plants around. So those 4 methods, I've got some more photos coming up, but the main idea that I really want to share tonight is this concept. I mean, in my head, I kind of think of it as a CSA exchange, where if urban farms and community composting hubs can stop collecting just food scraps, but start collecting half-made compost and send some of your soil off with your clients to mix with the food scraps, can we shift the narrative somehow with that? So I shared this idea over on LinkedIn. Oh, that's a future slide. Pictures here of the food scraps in the bottom of the plant pot. That's just watermelon and peaches. So the liquid's going to trickle down into these kind of spongy pieces of bark covered with soil, and then the plant goes on top. This Pacha pot, the bottom, I have wild ginger being eaten by worms. I top it up once a month or so, turn it, pull the soil out to use in different projects. And then the top is house plants that are now spilling over the side. And the middle is an in-ground worm farm that I swap out once a month or so. So this is like a little soil factory right by my desk. Over here, the food scrap buckets we use here in Auckland. There's this square plant pot that actually locks in on 3 sides and is completely sealed, that with a kind of a funky contraption at the back. I've just used cardboard. It would be quite easy to get something 3D printed. You could seal the gap up at the back, and there's probably 10 centimeters in the base of this that could have compost kind of, the soil and the food scraps mixing together. Okay, so this is something I shared on LinkedIn just after Christmas, and I'm showing some of my statistics at the top here. Just As part of the comms team, I've created an Aotearoa Composters Network LinkedIn page, and I would love to see our message getting out to, like, if we could get 67,000 impressions over the course of, what is that, 4 months, that would be amazing, hey? But I love sort of analyzing where there's a spike. And this spike just after Christmas was from a post here. So I reached 2,600 people, 75 likes, and it was the concept of what if supermarkets incentivized food scrap diversion by offering a discount to people who brought their food scraps into the supermarkets. Like, could our supermarkets be a hub for collecting food scraps? And I think, I post most days, and to get that much positive feedback from people following me all over the world, it kind of feels like there's an appetite for that sort of creative business model out there. That if there's someone in the ACN that's already doing this, I'd love to know about it and amplify what you're doing. If there's anyone who's not doing it but wants to try it, then I'd love to see how you get on. So I'm composting meat scraps inside. This is when I began initially. I had 2 pots. I weighed everything. They were identical, and one of the pots got biodynamic CPP, the other one didn't, and I wanted to see if there was a difference. After 3 months, I decided there was no discernible difference in the 2 batches. I needed my floor space back, so I just lifted everything up, and it's just all indoor composting, and they all get the biodynamic preps. Odor management is something I think if you're going to have food scraps inside, you might need to do a few extra things you don't necessarily do outside, because like we don't have a full cubic meter to get the hot compost process happening. So techniques I've used, biochar is a favorite. I think it's really, really, really good. Biodynamic CPP, the cowpat pit preparation, also seems to be really effective. This is a new thing I've been using, the QR Quick Return Compost Activator. And I'd love to do another Waste to Wonder, maybe in 6 months' time. I learned about the method end of December, so I've made 11 batches. I've opened up, I think, 5 batches of compost. 2 of the batches I've used have been with pretty smelly compost. One was a dead chicken that after I added the liquid floral compost activator, which is just powdered dried flowers, honey and milk sugar, and it sort of ferments for 24 hours. The chicken that was smelling pretty bad, the smell had gone within 2 hours of adding the activator. It was just like, how is this working? Other things I use in these small batches of compost, the fresh herbs, compost activator, companion plants, and then the twigs, the sticks, especially hugelkultur log pieces to act as sponges, and the fallen leaves. Picture at the top there is a CPP pit. If there's anyone that wants me to come and make a CPP pit with them, please holler out. One of my favorite things to do. I've documented heaps on my Make Soil pages, so I've got a different account for each of these types of composting that I do. I'd also be really happy to talk one day about human york composting if anyone's interested, because I think as water becomes more and more precious, we need dry toileting systems. Another thing I wanted to bring in was soil stories. So using small batches of composting to keep different event waste separate, to then be able to return the soil to the hosts of the event and have a sort of 360-degree circular compost story. And if we can start to get into the marketing of events, then it elevates the the perception of the composting. So it's not just waste management, but it's keeping the food system in that high vibrational state. So where I teach all these methods of the indoor composting is part of the online course Closing the Loop, the Art of Composting, where I've got video guides with all the basics, product reviews, case studies, myth busting, and I do community Zoom calls. So that QR code there is for that, for those that are watching the replay. And then next up for me is a whole bunch of other research projects. So I'm obsessed with harakeke. It composts beautifully, and this woven compost enclosure that I've been making, this is all the waste pieces that don't get used in raranga projects. I weave them into chicken wire. Takes about 200 stalks to get a nice dense compost enclosure like this. And that is, I think, the most liked, most highest reach of all my Instagram posts in 7 years. I think I'm up to 700 likes and 12,000 accounts have seen it. It's very, very cool. Floral compost activator. I've got a research project started with that, and the JPI Institute in America have come on board. We've written a proposal to the Biodynamic Research Conference. So fingers crossed we get accepted for that. So that will have monthly Zoom calls, and it's a way of using the same herbs that are used in the biodynamic compost preparations, but no animal parts, no fast, don't need to follow a lunar calendar, and it's really simple to make. You could do it in a kindergarten with children. Burn pile composting, I'm getting into leaf mold composting, teaching at botanic gardens, hospitality sector work, soil remediation. A lot of the sort of soil remediation, ecosystem harmonization is with the nature communication work. And then composting in respect to the design sector. So landscapers, architects, and interior designers, we need to redesign our kitchens. So that's all from me. The other QR code here is for my Ko-fi page. Shout me a coffee. All support much appreciated. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing